Do you have an item ready to hold up in case we need to do a edit here sign? All right, so we will look at the final ratings by the efficiency. Wait, is it? Do you want me to? Welcome into the D3 Datacast. I'm Zach Snyder, joined by Matt Snyder. How you doing, Matt?
Doing great. I'm just bumping to that intro music that we all love so much.
We do, and we're going to start hearing it with some more frequency, Matt. We don't divide our show into seasons, but if we did, this would be season 3, episode 1. Some D3 hoops teams have taken advantage of, now this is the second year where they can pull ahead some of their countable days to practice before the official October 15th start date. Some have taken advantage of that. And Matt, we are starting our season. We're flipping the switch right now.
Yeah.
And what that means is we're weekly from now until we crown a new champion. D3 Datacast back with weekly episodes. It feels good to be back.
Yeah, and we're back with D3 and we're gonna cast some actual data today. So that's what we're here. That's what we live for. So let's do it.
Let's do it. And before we cast forward, let's cast back, Matt, and take a look here as you set up our topic for the day.
Yeah, we're going to talk about preseason computer projections. So every year at d3datacast.com, I run efficiency ratings kind of based on the Ken Pomeroy Division 1 ratings. If you ever follow Ken Pom, did great work there. I've tried to replicate that for Division 3 basketball. I've been doing that for several years now. But we like to start with a baseline, give us somewhere to start. So that's what we're doing here, showing what the computer is going to use for the first few weeks of the season as its initial baseline, its expectation for teams coming into the year.
So a big portion of what gets set up as we look at the preseason time period here is a look back at last season, how the efficiency ratings turned out. Matt, take us through the highlights at the very top of the final efficiency rating standings last season.
Yeah, it's been a long offseason, so let's remember what things looked like to end last season, right? And I know it's long gone, and that magic's not here no more. But this is what the last season was, and ending the season, even though they weren't the national champions, Hampton-Sydney was number 1. Randolph-Macon was number 2. This is by the computer, right? So this isn't human voters or anything. This is just what the computer saw throughout last season, taking into account the entire season's worth of data, doing some time weighting based on the end of the season more heavily than the beginning of the season. But again, the computer ratings had Hampton-Sydney 1, Randolph-Macon 2, Trinity, Connecticut 3, Guilford 4. We saw 3 of those top 4 teams in the Final Four, but none of them won the national championship. That was Trine, who's down here at number 11. The computer still saw them as the number 11 team in the country, even after winning the national championship in Fort Wayne. They had a great tournament run there. But this is kind of the look at the top 11. And I'll fill in the gaps there for the podcast only listeners. Keene State was 5, Widener was number 6, UW Platteville was number 7, John Carroll was number 8, Calvin was number 9, and Oswego State was number 10. And one of the themes that we talked about, I feel like all last season, was that there were easily 8 to 10, 16 maybe, like that entire Sweet 16. Those were all teams that could have won the national championship. We saw a bunch of great teams in Fort Wayne last year, and ultimately it was Trine won the national championship here, just hanging on to that number 11 spot.
Yeah, taking a look at a top 11, Matt, is maybe a little unconventional, but there's a good reason there for that. And like you said, no surprise that the computer ratings come out with a bunch of teams that, for anyone who was following throughout the season, were the top teams, just by any random fan who was observing would say, this is a good group of teams. Now, Matt, I always like this time of year to refresh, or maybe we have some new people into the audience here, to give a little bit of a explanation of just, a little bit more about what goes into the preseason ratings, what goes into the efficiency ratings in general. I think it's good to be clear on what this is, what this isn't, what it means, what it doesn't mean, that kind of thing.
Yeah, so first of all, if you're not familiar with either my efficiency ratings or the Ken Pom ratings that I mentioned before, what are efficiency ratings in general? And that boils down to what is your team pace? How fast or slow do you play? That can play into some of this. And the overarching theme is that it tries to take that context out of the equation. So if you score a lot of points but you play fast, and you don't score as many points but you play slow, that kind of balances that out. So it's really just looking at points scored and points allowed per possession. And then for my sake, I just normalize it to per 100 possessions. But then it also takes into the context who you played. So how well did you perform at scoring points? How well did you perform at preventing points? And how good was that other team against what you did it? That's kind of how it boils down, and I sort teams by efficiency margin, right? So if you're plus 1 points efficiency margin, that means for every 100 possessions you play, you tend to outscore an average opponent by 1. So that'd be a pretty averagey team. The best teams in the country usually come out to be about plus 30. So a team like Hampton Sydney last year was around plus 30, and they would have been expected to outscore an average D3 team by about 30 points for every 100 possessions, or about 0.3 points in one possession. So that's kind of what an efficiency rating is, and I calculate that after several times a week, almost every day throughout the course of the Division III season. But today we're going to look at the preseason rating. So how do I calculate that? And what I do is I take a weighted average of the last 2 seasons. So last year's weighted the most. Then the year before that, a little bit, because hopefully some of those players and coaches and there's some program momentum maybe that's built in there. And then I also throw in a little bit of regression to the mean. So I take Division III average, which is basically 1 point per possession, basically 100 points per 100 possessions, both scored and allowed. And I throw that into each team. So expect everyone to be a little bit more average than they were in the past. And that's just kind of a hand wavy thing to do, but teams typically regress. If you were great last year, you probably had some really good players graduate, and you might be a little bit more average. And what this does is it kind of squishes teams toward the middle. So you won't see any plus 30 teams in a preseason projection from me. Even though we know probably a team's going to be at about that point come to the end of the season, we don't know exactly who it is. So we our top teams and our bottom teams kind of do get squished a little bit toward the middle because we're just unsure of how good or how bad all the teams are. So I do throw that regression to the mean chunk in there as well. And then one thing that this is not a look at who graduated, who transferred in. I'm not sophisticated enough at this point to look at that and say this team's got a D2 transfer or a D1 transfer, or that first team All-American graduated, or that guy's injured and he's not going to play all year or first semester or whatever. It's not that. It's just looking at team data from the last 2 seasons, team level data, and we might see some teams that are high and realize, hey, they lost everyone. Like they're probably not going to be that good. There might be some teams that look pretty mid on here, but we know maybe they're returning everyone back, or maybe they have an impact transfer, or maybe there was an injured player returning, and we know that's probably a team that's going to get better. So Zach, you and I usually have a tradition of picking teams to beat or miss their projections, and we'll do that again in today's episode. So no knowledge of roster turnover here. Don't expect that right now in these data. And really one of the main things here is to give stability to early season results. So just when they're running the computer ratings, for people like us, Zach, that are nerdy, that think computer ratings are fun and somewhat informative, maybe sometimes more fun than informative. And this gives us, the types of teams that we expect toward the top will be toward the top. So early season results have some of that context built in. And I do about 8 games worth. So after each team has played their 8th game, really that preseason rating is out of there. So we're talking maybe mid to late December for most teams, if my memory serves correctly. And the preseason ratings are going to be kind of gone anyway. So just to give some maybe sensical context to early season results. So that's what we're doing here with the preseason ratings.
And since you mentioned after 8 games, this is all gone, right? So there are people out there who aren't as interested in this type of thing. And so I guess 2 points to those group of people. After 8 games, it doesn't matter. Or you could just ignore this completely, and it doesn't matter, right? Because this is a starting point for the season based on some sort of premise that the top programs are generally the top programs. And I think people who have followed Division III basketball for a long time and there's differences in era and sort of thing, but typically, from year to year, there's a group of teams that you can expect to be good. And this sort of builds that expectation in and serves as an anchoring point for early season results. Because let's be honest, let's say a team plays the most efficient game they're going to play of the season, game 1, right? And we don't have that anchor point. And then let's say they play the least efficient game they're going to play all season, right? You can have these wild swings. So this kind of keeps things a little bit tethered to a certain expectation for a little bit. And you mentioned that 8 game mark, right? So you think about each input counting 1/8, right? So without any games, we've got 8 out of 8 is this preseason rating. And then by the time we get to 6 games played, 3/4 of whatever, you go to d3datacast.com and look at what the updated results, the updated efficiency margin ratings are for that day. And it's going to be 75% based on the actual games played and just the 25% to make up that last 2/8 based on the preseason. So this is just a starting point. This is not a projection of how we think teams are going to be at the end of the season. This is a starting point.
Exactly.
All right, Matt. So let's get into that starting point, taking a look at the top 40 this time for the 2024-25 season. Take us through here, the top of the preseason computer projections.
Yeah, starting today. So when this episode's live, you're going to see this live. If you go to d3datacast.com and go to the top link bar and go to efficiency ratings, you will start seeing for men's basketball and soon to be women's basketball the preseason computer projection. So you can look through this. I'm going to show the top 40 here, but you can see the entire list for the whole country where the computer is pegging them to start the year. And right now, all that data is ad-free. D3datacast.com is ad-free, and we'd like to thank our Patreon subscribers for helping us to participate in that. So if you'd like to help keep this stuff ad-free and just more user-friendly, go to patreon.com/D3Datacast, and you can support us there. We'll talk a little bit more about that later in the show. But yeah, going through the top 40, a team that has been familiar to the top of ratings like this is Randolph-Macon. They come in at number 1. They were not the number 1 team we just saw at the end of last season by the computer, but since the projection takes a couple of years of data into account, overall that they maintained the strongest rating. Hampton-Sydney there at number 2, Guilford number 3. So a really strong view of the ODAC starting out from the computer, and I think that played out last season. We saw that they were a very strong conference, easily, maybe in my mind last year the best. No doubt about it, top 3. So that wasn't even a conversation. So ODAC is expected to be strong again by the computer. Again, there's roster turnover and things and the like, but I think safe to say ODAC will be good. We'll see if they have the top 3 teams, but they will be good. Number 4, Trinity, Connecticut. That was a Final Four team from a year ago. Number 5, Keene State. Been a really strong program. Oswego State, number 6. Number 7, St. Joseph, Connecticut. So I think here we're seeing some effect of 2 years ago when they were, like the computers, one of their top 3 teams overall. They took a little bit of a step back last year. They were still good, but number 7 here, that's very strong. That's one maybe you could pick that would maybe miss the projection. Who knows? St. Joseph's has built a good program there. Johns Hopkins, number 8. Christopher Newport, number 9. No stranger to top 10 for Christopher Newport. NYU at 10. John Carroll, 11. Calvin, 12. WPI, 13. Williams, number 14. And Catholic, number 15. I'm going to take a little bit of a breather here, Zach, at top 15 after reading down the list. But right now, these are programs that we saw mostly be strong last year, or within the last 2 years, they've had strong seasons. Again, we think probably there's some ability, even if teams had taken a step back last year, that there's program strength. They're expecting probably good players in or players to develop there to give those teams successful seasons.
And to that point, Matt, let's talk about the number 1 team there, Randolph-Macon. That Buzz Anthony national championship team was a super juggernaut a couple years ago, and I feel like the last 2 seasons we've gone in and keep waiting for them to take a step back just to sort of like maybe like a midpoint of the top 25 poll if you're looking at it in terms of that. But it just hasn't come. You go back to how last season ended up. They were the number 2 team by efficiency rating, and it's just a true sign of a program that has it rolling. Josh Merkel's done a great job there, and it just seems like they have one national player of the year candidate out the door, another one steps up behind, and it's just a really good example of a true program turning it over year to year.
Yeah, exactly. They did take some losses last year, but it was mostly an ODAC play, so it was other strong conference teams. And you mentioned that strong national championship team. That data's gone from the computer's mind, so the computer doesn't even know about that national championship team. It just has still known what they've done in the 2 years after Buzz Anthony graduated and after the seniors on that team graduated. I think there is a lot of program momentum. As you said, we know Josh Merkel's going to have a strong team. Will they be number 1? I would bet probably not next year, but will they be good? Will they be in the top 25 conversation next season? Yeah, probably in some way. So not surprised to see them at the top, and definitely a team I would pick to be in the national mix just based on the program, right?
Absolutely. All right, Matt, if you're ready to pick up after the top 15 here, I think there's some more interesting names to get into.
Yeah, I'll continue reading the list for the benefit of the Spotify or Apple podcast listeners here. UW Platteville at 16. Rowan from the NJAC at number 17. Mary Washington had a really strong year out of the coast to coast, played really a lot of tough games last year, but the computer still liked them. Widener, number 19, we saw them inside of the top 10 last year. Swarthmore, another just strong program in here at number 20. Trine, the national champions from last year at number 21. I have a feeling that this is going to end up on a bulletin board. Down in Angola is seeing at the computer only has them at number 21 last year. I think they'll be strong. Maybe they would be a pick to beat expectations right here. Case Western Reserve at number 22. Mount Union, number 23, Tufts at number 24, and Emory at number 25. Emory, in the strong UAA, a team always in and around the top 25 conversation.
And we talked about Trine, Matt, the defending national champion. They have a lot coming back. You talked about them as a potential team to outperform that expectation. I also look at Platteville. I think you could pick out a few teams here that could be national champion contenders, as the season plays out. So an interesting starting point here, just, based on that recent history. In some respects, there are some examples, there might be, some momentum building through that history. And I think that's maybe the case there, where there's teams that you can expect to be on an upward trajectory that they've been on the last couple of years and heading into the season. And, sometimes that goes the other way for some other programs. Matt, Swarthmore is a really interesting case. They, at the midway point of last season, you could kind of leave them for dead, maybe in terms of the tournament picture. They go on to make an incredible run here the second half of the season, pick up a win in the NCAA tournament. So another really good program, Matt, and one that I think, have some losses to overcome, but to some extent was able to, get through some rough patches last season and build some momentum. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with a Swarthmore team that, had that happen last season, and with some positive momentum, but also has some strong program history, going back a little bit further.
Yeah, 100%. And as I read that list from 16 to 25, myself as a top 25 voter, I just don't go through my computer ratings and just vote top to bottom, top 25. Assuming I'm invited back into the top 25 mix this year, there are some teams in that kind of second half there, 16 to 25, that I will consider right at the top of my ballot at number one. Probably looking at programs like Platteville, probably looking at programs like Trine and saying, these teams are going to be pretty high up my ballot, even though the computer's starting point expectation is maybe mid to back half of the top 25. Those are teams I might be considering right at the top. Got a lot to go through. Haven't really digested that for myself, so I'm not making any promises to any programs, but I use this as kind of a starting point to organize my thoughts, but I'm not as a voter, right? I think we have the ability to beat a simple projection system like this with kind of some of our own knowledge, and I'll be looking at that as well.
Yeah. Good to point out that as a top 25 voter, you're not beholden to clicking the button and turning in a ballot based on what that shows as 1 through 25.
Yeah, and I could do that, and I'm heavily influenced by that just throughout the season, but I think that's not the goal of a top 25, right? I throughout the season, I do largely look at computer ratings, but also I have a good amount of, but I kind of think this, and until I'm proven wrong, I'll kind of go with my gut a little bit too.
Reminds me a bit, Matt, of an episode we did way back when, where we talked about different types of rankings and the different types of things that they do.
That was season one,
right?
Wasn't that?
Right. So there's, not every ranking or poll is trying to accomplish the same thing.
Exactly. Yeah.
Interesting. All right. Little D3 Datacast history there. All right, Matt, we will not turn this into a D3 list cast. All right. So we won't finish out the entire line by line top 40 here. Head to d3datacast.com if you're interested in digesting it a little bit more, going beyond the top 40. Matt, every team is listed and ranked here based on a preseason computer projection. Our viewers can go there and spend some time digesting it for themselves, because, as you mentioned, none of this premium information is behind a paywall, thanks to the support of our patrons.
Thank you very much.
All right, Matt, let's take a look now at we'll call them preseason movers, right? Some teams
Yeah.
who, finished the 24 season one place, and then we're, running this analysis for a preseason ranking. And I know you kind of combed through it and picked out a handful of teams that were worth a mention. Let's take a look here.
Yeah, nothing super scientific about this. I just looked through and see who seemed to swing, maybe comparatively where they were ranked, swung a bunch from the end of last season into the preseason this year. So again, just kind of a random list here that I picked off. One is Christopher Newport. The computers had them finishing up last season at number 22. I think they were another team like Swarthmore who went through some rough patches in the middle part of the season. Although they were good all year long, but then they really found themselves at the end of the season into the tournament and made on a really big run. Um, they were on the verge of actually another Final Four last year. I believe it was an Elite Eight game against Guilford. Was it that Christopher
It
Newport
was.
was in? So they actually had a strong finish to the season. The computers, again, taking the last couple of years, they were the previous year's national champion. Sees them as number 9. That's another strong program that you never feel bad about putting them kind of around number 10. And the computer did that the same based on the last couple of years of data. Loris had a strong season out of the American Rivers Conference. They were number 12 in the final ratings last year. Preseason, they're dropping back to number 35 outside of the top 25. The computers saw Loris as a team that made a big jump last year, but on the history of maybe the season before, they were not quite as nationally elite. So maybe computers going to peg them a little bit of a step back and see kind of how they do this year. Loris could very easily be back up into that number 12 zone, but the computers taking a little bit of a wait and see approach on them. Maybe the exact reverse of that is Williams. Williams also had got some good tournament wins this year, but some of their results, if not always wins and losses, were maybe a little bit shaky or a little bit questionable. The computer usually likes elite teams to win, games that you should win and win them significantly. Sometimes to the computer, style points do matter. Williams was a team that maybe didn't always get the style points when you thought they should. Last year, the computer had them at number 31, which maybe is a little low. But already in the preseason, number 14, that's another strong program. Williams in the top 25 is never a surprise. So the computer moves Williams up based on their last 2 seasons of results. Another program that I thought was interesting was Nazareth out of the Empire 8. They had a really strong season 2 years ago. Last year, not as much. They had taken a step back, so the computer is going to kind of split the difference and put them just inside that top 50. See what happens in the Empire 8 this year with some teams moving around in kind of the Empire or the SUNYAC to Empire 8 kind of realm there. But Nazareth is a team that's maybe expected to step forward from where they were last year, so the computer wants to see if they will do that this year. In a similar vein, out of the WIAC, UW Oshkosh had some very strong runs before last year, had some injuries to deal with, some players graduating. They had taken a fairly significant step back to around the number 100 mark, number 105 at the end of last season. Computer expects Oshkosh, strong program there. We know they have a strong coaching staff, maybe like to move them up closer to the top 50. So we'll see what happens there. Again, not scientific, just a random list I picked out, but to see how teams may move around based on last year, the year before, what the computer thinks their kind of program strength or recent history might be and how it shuffles them around.
That Christopher Newport season remains, Matt, one of the wilder
Yeah.
seasons I can think of, right? They're coming off the national championship. They bring back
Most of everyone.
most of
Yeah.
their core,
Yeah.
right? And then get off to a rocky start. And then, by the end of the season, though, they're playing as well as anyone, making that run with a roster that really looks nothing like the one that we expected coming into the season. Just a wild season, but I mean, boy,
Yeah.
I don't know what kind of work John Krikorian was doing or having to do in that program, but
Yeah.
heck of a job because they were right there at the end. I think within a possession of another Final Four,
Yeah.
with really not at all the team we thought they were going to have coming in. Just roster wise and performance wise, just wild. It's gonna take some sort of scenario to unseat that as maybe the most wild season I can think of in for any Division III basketball team. And then Matt, I like to think of this kind of look as a measure of how much a team's previous season was maybe atypical for what they kind of usually are. And I think you definitely see that with Oshkosh. You mentioned a few different reasons maybe why that season didn't go the way that we come to expect an Oshkosh season to go. I mean, you don't expect UW Oshkosh in this day and age to be the last team to pick up a WIAC conference victory, right? But that's what happened last season. So, yeah, not the kind of season we expect from them, but that means that this season should be better, right?
That's what the computer thinks, at least to start out. So we'll see
We'll
what
see it
happens.
play out. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, Matt, you mentioned earlier, I did a little quick tease that we like to do some picks and predictions based on these preseason ratings. So let's get into it. Starting with a look back at how we fared as in our look before last season.
Yeah, I don't remember if we recapped this at all or not, but let's do it now at least because we made the picks, so let's tell the people how we did. So last season's episode, we went through an exercise where we picked the team kind of in the top 25 that we thought was still going to beat their projection. Then we picked the team that was kind of more in the top 100, and then a team that was more in the top 200 or thereabouts. And then we each picked the team that we thought, wherever they were ranked, we thought that they would miss their projection. They'd rank lower. So let's go through that, Zach. You had Wash U, who was preseason number 14 by the computer, plus 17-ish efficiency margin. I'm going to give you a red, 0 points for that one. They were number 48 at the end of the season by the computers, 15.8 efficiency margin. So, Zach, you missed because Wash U missed. The next team you had was maybe a little bit of a gimme putt, John Carroll at number 98. We knew for whatever reason the computers did not like them the previous season, but they looked like they were going to be a strong team. You are absolutely green. Let's give you 2 points for this one, plus 24.4 efficiency margin. They were in the top 10, number 8 overall. Absolutely beat their projection there was John Carroll. And then another team you picked, number 117, Carthage, and I'm going to give you green as well. Computer had them plus 6.3, and they ended up plus 8.3. Number 117 preseason, and you had them and they finished at 106. So you kind of barely squeak in there with Carthage, but that's green and that's green. So that's 2 points for you. So for your beating projections, I'll give you 4 out of 6 there.
I thought that Carthage pick would be a little bit more comfortable, but
yeah, sometimes we think we know. Like it's easy to pick the easy ones, but it's hard to pick ones that don't end up being easy. And whatever, if that makes any sense at all.
And that WashU team was a young team, brought a lot back. Now I think there were some injuries, but I'm not sure ultimately I was close enough to be able to claim that as an excuse.
Yeah, and they were a team that bounced back and forth all season long, even in my own top 25 poll of how good I thought they were. So my number 1 pick was Case Western Reserve at number 20 overall at a plus 16 efficiency margin. I'm going to give myself purple because they beat that efficiency margin at 19.6, but they were number 28 by the computers. So I'm going to give myself 1 out of 2 points there. I'm going to give that a purple score. So I'll get 1 point for that one. My next pick was NYU, who was 34 at plus basically 14 efficiency margin. They finished up number 15 at plus 21, so I will get the credit for NYU. And my next pick was North Park, number 101. We had just seen them maybe in the Sweet 16 the year before. We thought that program was on the rise. They were easily going to beat that projection. That was going to be another gimme putt, and I missed that one. They finished number 137 at plus 5.3 efficiency margins, Zach. So I only get 3 points out of 6 on that one, 50-50 against the computer. Last year, your pick to miss the projection was Yeshiva. The computer had them coming into the season at number 66, expecting a plus 10 efficiency margin. They did not finish that strong. They were only plus 1, a much more average number 192 overall out of whatever we have, 412 Division III teams. So you got the Yeshiva pick, even though you picked up some flack in the DMs for picking Yeshiva to miss projections. You were correct, 2 points there. I had one that we thought was a gimme putt, Wheaton, Illinois. Number 17 by the projections, 16 efficiency margin, and that ended up being an easy one. They were, again, much more average, minus 0.7 efficiency margin, number 214 overall. Wheaton fell way back to the pack after making the Elite Eight the year before. They were much more average, struggled in the CCIW there, and I get 2 points. So you get 4 out of 6 overall, and I get 5 out of 6. So we will say you won last year.
I think that would be out of 8 instead of out of 6, Matt, but we'll go with it.
4. Oh, yeah, I'm not a math guy. That's out of 8. Yep.
Yeah, I know. I do remember that North Park was another one of the teams I was considering, so I'm glad that you ended up picking them.
That looked easy. I think we maybe even said in the background, okay, you get John Carroll, I'll get North Park, and then we each get one of the automatic ones.
Yeah,
and,
right, exactly.
Was not the case. All right, so let's move on to this season. Zach, you ready to make your picks for this year?
I am, yes.
And a little bit of a
All right.
behind the scenes magic. We actually already made our picks, but you can announce yours.
Yeah, Matt, as my top 25 team, I'm picking uh, to exceed their projection. I'm going to go with Tufts. Now, I'll say that I'm less confident in them exceeding their ordinal rank here, Matt, but at a plus 15.5, I'm feeling better. All right, so we kind of talked about this case with you and ending up with the purple grade on Case Western. Maybe I'm in a situation where it's something similar here, but Tufts, um, they've exceeded that plus 15.5 each of the last 3 seasons. So even going back beyond the scope of what these preseason projections are based on, Tufts has exceeded that number. Now that ranking, that 24 is kind of right around where they've been. So I'm gonna take the I'm gonna hope that having to pick someone inside the top 25 by going with number 24, I've got just upside here. But I do like them to eclipse that plus 15.5 adjusted efficiency margin.
They seem like a team that's always in the mix, no matter what. So I think that's a good call there for Tufts maybe to sneak higher into the top 25, or at least stay in the top 25 kind of realm all season long. My top 25 team to beat is going to be UW Platteville, as you can see on the screen. They're a team, they lost in that Elite Eight game at Trine, a game they should have won. I'm sure they have not watched that tape. They will hate watching that tape. They're a team in my mind that could have won the national championship last year. We saw that game be neck and neck, Trine winning the national championship. That easily could have been Platteville in that spot. They're a team that I'm probably going to consider at 1, 2, 3, 4, somewhere in my top 25 ballot. I think they have a lot of players returning from what was a really good team last year. At least that's what I'm led to believe at this point. So right now I'm going to pick UW Platteville, number 16. I'm thinking they're going to beat that projection.
Moving on to a team in the top 100, Matt, that we think is going to beat their projection. I'm going to go with Wisconsin Lutheran, Matt. Great episode of the QCast. Put this one on my radar here. They've got 5 guys who could have been done with their college basketball careers, but this is the last year where there's the extra year of eligibility due to the effects of COVID, and they've got all 5 of those guys coming back. There was a time when they thought that wasn't going to be the case, but it is happening. They took host Wash U to overtime in the first round of the 2024 NCAA tournament in a game that at times, man, it looked like they were going to win. So, it's one thing to bring a bunch of guys back, but they're bringing a bunch of guys back from a team that was good and probably underappreciated last year. Matt, you also talked about that these are adjusted efficiency margins, right? So that there's a correction for strength of schedule. The NACC is not always a conference that's on the map when
Right.
we're talking about power conferences. And the NACC conference schedule only leaves room for 7 non-conference games. But you look at WLC's non-conference schedule; they're playing 4 CCIW teams, Matt, and they've got a trip on the schedule down to San Antonio to play 2 games at Trinity. Now, those opponents are to be announced. I couldn't find that here as of recording date, but I feel like that's the type of trip you make expecting to get some good competition. Um, so I think this is going to be a great schedule for Wisconsin Lutheran to challenge themselves and probably prove some things on the national scene. I like where they're sitting. I think there's some upside there.
Yeah, definitely an opportunity to prove themselves through the non-conference there for Wisconsin Lutheran. My pick, I'm going to sneak a team just inside the top 100 here with TCNJ. They were a team for me that was making an incredible run at the end of last season into the NJAC tournament. They were really on the rise. I think, again, I haven't really dived into it. I haven't seen a ton of rosters. I think they have the ability to return a bunch of players from that team. So I'm thinking we could be expecting good things from TCNJ and the NJAC. We'll have to see as rosters continue to get posted how that turns out. But I'm liking TCNJ at number 97 to maybe beat that projection, beat the expectations here, and be a team to compete in the NJAC.
All right, then a team outside the top 100, Matt. This is my redemption pick. After taking some heat from Max Nation for picking Yeshiva as a team to underperform last season, although I was correct, I will take them as a team to overperform this year. And Matt, this is just based on a case of what I know versus what the computer knows, right? Last season, that Yeshiva projection still had the last season of the Ryan Terrell, Gabe Leifer era in there, and with all due respect, like that roster wasn't quite
Wasn't the same.
replacing like
Yeah.
two great Division III basketball players. So I was just leaning that way for that reason. Of course, I was correct. Now let's go the other way, right? So the that's water under the bridge now. I think Yeshiva still has a program that you really have to respect. Elliot Steinmetz has done a great job there. I think they're going to have an improved roster. I think where we're at right now, or what we see there, is basically a floor for what we can expect from this Yeshiva program, and there's just upward momentum from here.
Yeah. Also, they dealt with injuries, I think, all season
Correct.
long last year. So,
Correct.
hopefully healthier this year, have some more players coming in addition to that. I
Right.
could definitely see them beating that projection, maybe quite easily. My pick from kind of the top 200 range, I was a little bit throwing darts at this one. I'm going to pick Ohio Northern. They're a team, they're a program historically with some success. They have not been, in that national elite conversation the last couple of years. I'm going to pick Ohio Northern in the always strong OAC to beat that number 133 level +4 efficiency margin. I'm thinking they can get up into that top 100 zone. So I'm looking for the Polar Bears, Ada, Ohio here, beat the projection and give me a couple points here.
And now the bad part.
Yeah, we
All
like to
right,
have
Matt.
3 positive and then only 1
Right.
negative, but we have to pick the other side of the coin too.
Right. Okay, so the other side of the coin here, Matt, a team to miss. I'm going to go with WPI.
Okay.
I start by looking at the rankings and just kind of give it an eyeball test. Is there a team that maybe I'm a little bit surprised to see where they are? I picked out WPI in part because of that, but also I feel like as we've tracked this the last couple of years, for whatever reason, they've been one of the computer darlings.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to go based on a premise. Who knows? Maybe this is a faulty premise, but on the premise that being a computer darling is an effect of randomness, right? There's nothing inherent about the WPI program that would cause them to be set up to be a computer darling. And so if this is random, then that's not something we can build into expectation going forward. That's all a little bit theoretical, Matt, but on the personnel side, WPI also loses their top 2 scorers from a year ago to higher division basketball, including new MAC Player of the Year John Adams, who's moved on to D1, the Citadel. And he was a career double-double guy. He was among like the team leaders in just about every statistical category. You remove a guy like that, you can't expect there to be some growing pains or just adjustments. So I'm going to go with WPI here.
Yeah, that's a good call. I have a similar view of WPI in that sometimes the computer really, really likes them, and maybe when push comes to shove, they don't always quite live up to that really high billing. So I don't really know what that is, if that is something related to their schedule or their results versus certain types of teams or whatever, or like you said, probably just a result of some amount of randomness. I think that's a decent call there. My pick for a team to miss is going to be Keene State, and this is really just on how high they are. Number 5. That's how good they were last year. Like, they were a team that was kind of deserving of that type of a number. Jeff Hunter's graduated. I think they do have Octavio Brito back, if I'm correct in that he is returning. So one of the great players of Division III will still be there. But even if they finish number 10, right, still a really good season, then I get this pick. So this is much respect for where the Keene State program has been and is and can continue to be. I just looked at the teams kind of around this and I said Keene State, maybe they're a little bit more of a back half top 25, or at least that's where I'm expecting them to be coming into the season. So really not, no shots at Keene State where I expect them to be, but maybe not quite number 5 for me right now. So I'm going to pick the Keene State Owls to miss their computer projection.
Yeah, when you're number 5, it's hard to move anywhere but down.
Yeah. Yep.
So Matt, there we go. The table's set. We're ready for the season. The D3 Datacast is in regular season mode. Weekly episodes are back, starting with this episode. It's a lot of fun, Matt. I got to say, it felt good to be, looking at a set of ratings, digging into some rosters to try to come up with some picks here. It felt right. It felt good. It's good to be back.
Yeah, you and I have done some work to go through our schedule. So when do we want to record? What types of episodes do we want to release between now and the start of the season? So yeah, we're in season mode. We're doing this thing every single week.
Let's go.
Yeah.
And we've alluded to it a few times during the season, Matt, but we're grateful for all the people who have supported us in ways big and small, long-term, short-term. One of those ways, of course, is through our Patreon at patreon.com/D3Datacast. We'll have a new episode out every Monday morning in our normal time slot that we've adopted here over the last couple years. But Matt, at our Great Job Team tier on the Patreon page, those supporters get access to episodes as soon as we're done with them. As soon as they're uploaded to YouTube, they're made available to these people. They don't have to wait for Monday morning. They'll get this episode sometime over the weekend, maybe Friday evening. We'll see. But we're grateful for their ongoing support. And yeah, if what we do is something that helps aid your Division III basketball experience, consider this voluntary subscription. Like the site, no ads, no paywalls. We're doing that. So consider this a voluntary subscription if that's something you might have considered. One more final note on the Patreon, Matt. We had Mims join us as a Great Job Team supporter. Name shout out here for Mims. Great to have another person join the supporter list here since our last episode.
Love everyone that has joined the Patreon. Thank you so much. The top two things you can do to support the show is one, subscribe. Hit subscribe if you've not done that below. Number two, join the Patreon and partner with us. Thank you so much, Mims. Thank you so much for everyone else who's done that, Zach. For now, we're going to say, good job, team.
See you next week.